These are the words of Mr. Dale Ahlquist, who's the president of the American Chesterton Society. He's the creator and host of the Eternal Word television network series, G.K. Chesterton, the Apostle of Common Sense. What is wrong with the world and how to fix it? That key word which unlocks the doors of all politics and all economy is family. That's a quote from G.K. Chesterton. Let's dive into this short little essay. And I'm going to use lots of fun accents so that I don't stutter. Most normal, carefree people would rather avoid arguing about politics and religion. They fall in love and get married and, in the normal course of events, have children. Then they begin thinking about two things: the world in which they are raising their child and the soul of their child. In other words, they start thinking about politics and religion. Unfortunately, most people with families don't have the time and money to become political activists. Most of the people who do have the time and the money to be political activists don't have families. The laws these people lobby for with great success represent special interest groups, but they do not represent the interests of that general interest group, the family. As a result, most laws are very much anti-family. Liberals are always defending the rights of various oppressed minorities. Many people are oppressed and need to be defended. Unfortunately, liberals tend to defend rights that are not rights at all. There are wrongs for which they are fighting. Conservatives are always defending free trade, but there's nothing free about it. It is very expensive and thus reserved for the realm of the very rich. Conservatives are always defending less government and lower taxes, and indeed government is too big and taxes are too high. But the rich pay too many taxes only because they take too much money. Poor people don't pay enough taxes because they don't make enough money. G.K. Chesterton says, quote, "It is a bad economic sign in the state that masses of our fellow citizens are too poor to be taxed," end quote. In general, the left represents big government and the right represents big business. The left represents socialism and the right represents capitalism. The two are the same thing because both are against the widespread distribution of private property. Chesterton says, quote, "Socialism and capitalism are today fundamentally the same. They both aim at control of a servile nation by a bureaucratic class, centralized, which of course means a centralized financial control," end quote. The liberal few and the conservative few want... Oh, it's becoming the Donald Trump one. The liberal few and the conservative few want to control property and capital, both use each other and even depend on each other. Big government has its hands on big money, big money, very big money. The biggest big money has its hands on big government. Hilaire Belloc described this as the servile state, and Chesterton says, quote, "The servile state uses socialists and anti-socialists alike as its tools," end quote. Now, there is something desperately wrong with the world when something so basic, so traditional, so universal, and so normal as the family has to be defended. The family is the strength of any strong society. It is what passes the culture from one generation to the next. It is what lasts in any lasting society. It is what thrives in any thriving society. Chesterton calls the family a tiny kingdom that creates and loves its own citizens. The family will do a better job of protecting, nurturing, educating, and helping people than any outside official agency or any hired servant. Everything about the servile state undermines the family. Big government tries to replace the authority and functions of the family. Big business breaks up the family by pulling both the father and the mother out of the home and reducing them to wage slaves. Quote, It has come to pass that working men have been surrendered, all isolated and helpless to the hard-heartedness of employers and the greed of unchecked competition. A small number of very rich men have been able to lay upon the teeming masses of the labouring poor a yoke little better than that of slavery itself. End quote. That is from Pope Leo XIII, Rerum Novarum, encyclical letter on capital labour. That is from the 1800s. Wise words, but let's continue, perhaps with a different accent. These are the words of Pope Leo XIII on his 1901 encyclical Rerum Novarum, which is the basis of Catholic social teaching and is also the basis for distributism. In order for the family to have its proper authority in society, local government must be more influential than state or federal government. Local government means neighbours who are accountable to each other. When politics were more local, says Chesterton, they were more truthful. The state should fulfil no more than its minor role in our lives. This is the principle known as subsidiarity, that speaks of what the higher orders owe the lower orders. The most important decisions must be left to the individuals, to families, to local communities. The central government's only responsibility should be to provide those services which cannot be provided otherwise, and that should be a short list, much to the applause of the common man, indeed. Government should not provide for needs, including humanitarian and educational needs that traditionally were served by religion. Religion provided these things because religion has a higher purpose. When the state provides it, there's no higher purpose and the things become ends in themselves. State support of the arts leads to art for art's sake. State support of healthcare leads to health for health's sake. State support of education leads to the vanity and dead end of knowledge for knowledge's sake. A large, purely secular state will be empty at its core and will collapse on itself. It simply cannot be sustained, certainly not when the only thing left to sustain it is sheer coercion. The state that is supposed to defend our freedom slowly destroys our freedom, which is why Chesterton says, we do not get good laws to restrain bad people. We get good people to restrain bad laws. The word liberal has to do with freedom. The word conservative has to do with keeping tradition. Freedom and tradition are good things, but freedom means responsibility, not irresponsibility, and conservative does not mean leaving something alone. It means we have to work hard just to keep things the same. If we want a white post, we have to keep painting it white. Nevertheless, it is useful to remind liberals and conservatives about the meanings of the words they use to describe themselves. It is not liberal to have compulsory education, compulsory insurance, and compulsory temperance. It is not conservative when small businesses are not conserved, when local shops owned by our neighbours are not conserved, when small farms, Radio Farm, are not conserved. Shout out Brad Tucker, man. While liberals and the conservatives bicker about who has the better system, the real problem is that we are living under both systems right now. Socialism and capitalism are not at war with each other. They are in cahoots with each other. They have formed that unholy alliance, the servile state. Big government propped up by big business, and big business propped up by big government. We see examples of the servile state everywhere. The military-industrial complex, the state and federal highway system that supports the automobile industry, a news industry that has a mutually parasitic relationship with the government. Ooh, those are fighting words. Hope I don't get in trouble for that. A huge bureaucracy that is supported by the regulation of industry. an industry that is supported by huge government contracts and government bailout of banks and insurance companies. We have an economy that is largely based on exchange rather than on production. Our main industries are health and education, which are also big branches of government, very big branches of government, which is why we are moving toward national health insurance to match a national education system to prop up another huge industry that cannot support itself. Farming has become industrialized and so is subsidized. In every town, there once was a public square, a free, open area, not only for buying and selling, but also for talking and yelling and arguing. Now we have shopping malls, and I might add, Amazon. But shopping malls, which are private places for buying and selling, where people are herded along and kept in line, and these giant commercial spaces are underwritten by the state through tax increment financing. The vast majority of the population are either wage slaves or bureaucrats. A clerk sitting at a desk does not know the difference, whether he is working for a large corporation or a large state agency. Both liberals and conservatives have gotten it wrong. One side emphasizes freedom without responsibility, or rights without responsibility. The other emphasizes the responsibility without the freedom. Which side does which? It depends on whether you're talking about sex or money. Liberals want sex without responsibility, and conservatives want money without responsibility. The liberals' liberalization of sex and the conservatives' conservation of money are both gigantic moral problems that damage our society because they both undermine the family. Catholic social teaching is about protecting the family. All social encyclicals reinforce this, but the most important Catholic document defending the family in the modern world arrived in 1968, Humanae Vitae. Pope Paul VI saw the dangers of contraception at the time, but the destruction today is even more pervasive than he foretold. A contraceptive mentality is raping the earth, in fact. It is contraceptive mentality that is responsible for the myopic nature of modern economics, according to Pope Paul VI. More wealth actually brings more misery, engendering fruitless, self-serving desires that can never be fulfilled. An economy based on the philosophy that bigger is better can never be satisfied because there can never be enough. There can only ever be more. The contraceptive mentality also leads to the notion of lending, that is, of building endless debt and never paying for anything. Take the pleasure and run. But a consumer-driven society that is buying but never paying is headed for collapse. This is the same mode of insanity described by Chesterton when he talks about the modern world that exalts lust but forbids fertility. It cannot be sustained. Yet anyone who talks about restraint is vilified, whether it is restraint in free trade or restraint in free love. The truth is that neither trade nor love is free. Both require responsibility and discipline. Both require limits. It is the idea of limits that the modern world finds so repugnant. The freedom is mistakenly understood as the throwing off of restraint, but true freedom exists within the rules. Freedom, which is self-government, means self-control. The essence of distributism is self-government, self-control, self-sufficiency. The foundation of distributism is ownership. The heart of distributism is the family. The state and the marketplace must serve the family, not the other way around. We must make government and commerce more local and more accountable. Where do we begin? By hating the world enough to change it, and loving it enough to think it worth changing.